Hey, indie filmmakers, I'm Griffin Hammond.
I'm Nick Bodmer, and on this week's episode, there are some words you can't say on TV, some words you may not be able to say in your film, and we figure out what the we can say on our podcast.
Plus, your questions about prime lenses, operating a Glidecam, and picture profiles for cameras. Sorry for bleeping you, Nick.
I felt dirty saying it out loud. I'm glad to know it's getting beeped.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about censorship and bleeping things. And I guess I just want to say off the bat that we're not going to spend this whole episode swearing. I guess that's just like how our show is. It's family friendly.
Family friendly. I've got 3 little kids probably listening at the door right now as I said the F word.
That might be a first on the Hey Indie Filmmakers podcast.
Yeah. Usually not language I use.
In fact, I'm trying to think.
Recording.
Have all our episodes been like G-rated?
I would think so. I don't recall swearing. If I did, you've probably beat me or bleep me or cut me out. I don't know.
Right. Well, and so today, the inspiration for today's episode, we want to talk about why we don't use bad language on the podcast and whether or not we can use it in our films and on television. But it all stems from a question that we got from our friend Danny Tanner, who teaches digital media at Kingsley Junior High.
Hey guys, I'm thinking about showing Sriracha to my class. I know there are a couple times that people swear throughout the documentary, so I'm trying to figure out what the Motion Picture Association of America would rate the movie. Or if it doesn't, how would you go about getting one?
That is a good question, Griffin. What rating would you give Sriracha? It doesn't have a rating, right?
It does not. In fact, it made me curious, can it have a rating? Could I give it a rating? Do you have any idea?
I give it a rating of G for good. You're welcome.
Well, and the funny thing about the rating system is G makes it sound like it's a kid's movie, but I think it probably would be G.
Well, I'm trying to think. Is it what even remotely inappropriate content could there be? Are there swears in it? I don't remember because I can't think of any.
Well, Danny mentions that there are 2 swears. There's actually 3 if you listen all the way to the end. There's another one in the credits.
Oh, and some of the music? Is that where it comes from?
I don't even think the music has swears. It's just in the script, there are a couple places where people swear, and I've actually bleeped them all out.
If someone tells you they don't like Sriracha, it's full of
He's a genius.
Hey, I just want you to know that your Sriracha hot chili sauce is the best chili sauce.
You watch some kids' movies. Do they ever bleep things so that they can get a swear word in?
I mean, only for comedic effect, I think.
Right.
But yes, I think that does happen. And actually, even G movies get away with some fairly inappropriate content that just goes over kids' heads, if that makes any sense.
Right. Well, in fact, I think I have the G rating from the MPAA is that all ages are admitted and there's no language, nudity, sex, violence, that sort of thing.
Sounds pretty boring to me.
I would think that probably all our podcast episodes, most of my YouTube videos, Sriracha, I think they're all G rated.
So let me ask you, why is that? Are you a giant prude? You just keep all bad content out of your life altogether? Is that the case?
I guess I just want it to be accessible. This podcast, iTunes actually gives you the ability to label things as explicit.
Mm-hmm.
The episode could be explicit. I don't think we've had to label any of our episodes explicit. And I can't imagine why we would need to. It just seems like we'd be closing down our audience a little bit more.
Yeah, for me, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and there are some I know I can listen to when my kids are in the car, and there are some I just have to save till they're gone. Not because the content is inappropriate, because some shows just do not drop swear words, and some of them occasionally will, and you aren't expecting it. So those are the ones that I can't play when I've got the kids in the car. So I appreciate those ratings, and you kind of learn that as you listen to something.
Yeah. Well, and I was wondering, so Sriracha doesn't officially have a rating. I think it probably would be G, but I just assumed I couldn't get one because I'm an independent film, but I realized you actually can just go out and get a rating.
Does it cost a lot of money?
It does. It's it doesn't necessarily have to be a ton of money. The range is anywhere from $750 to $25,000 to buy a rating for your film. And I found out if Sriracha were just 3 minutes shorter, if it were under 30 minutes, it would be a short subject film and would only cost $750. But because I'm a few minutes too long, I'd have to pay, it looks like $2,500.
Can you just cut the credits and call it done?
Yeah, maybe.
And then get the rating and then just be like, well, that should count.
But I realize I just don't need one. No one's ever asked me for a rating. I mean, I'm sure if I had a rating, it could appear next to my film and on some platforms like iTunes, but it's not like it's affecting the market for my film.
Very interesting, sir.
And do you know who actually makes these ratings?
The Motion Picture Association of America?
Yes, kind of. They invented the rating system.
Okay.
And they have, apparently, it's very secretive. There's actually a film about this secret system called This Film Is Not Yet Rated. But it's a bunch of parents, apparently, on like a parental board that get to decide if the film, I mean, that's really why the rating system exists, is for parents. So I guess some people will take a look at it and decide where it lands. But it's all kind of, it's not cut and dry. It's not like if you say the F word.
Right?
Yeah. I mean,
see, you can have a PG movie with the F word in it?
Maybe. I think oftentimes you see F word in PG-13 movies, and then it seems like if you have enough, then it becomes an R-rated film. And
is it true, I've heard that sometimes a movie they'll release it to the ratings boards and it'll come back R, and they're really worried about how that's going to affect their ticket sales, so they re-edit it down to a PG-13 level? Like they remove some of the things that offend people or something?
That happens. There's definitely a correlation between the more accessible the film is, the box office usually does better. So like a PG movie will probably do better than a PG-13 movie.
Interesting. Are there a lot of R movies that come out these days? I guess it seems like most things, like every Marvel movie is PG-13, right? Has there ever been an R Marvel movie?
I don't know.
I would guess not, right?
Yeah, you could imagine it's gonna, I mean, for a big budget blockbuster, you probably don't want to be an R-rated film. But all of this system is kind of funny. It's a voluntary system. You don't have to have a rating, but of course, it's become kind of this thing where you do need a rating if you want audiences to show up. But this was all instituted in 1968 after many years of kind of like turmoil in terms of censorship in films.
Well, I watched that little primer you had on it, and there looked like there was some pretty risque stuff back in the day, which is odd because you think of it as a more prude time.
Yeah, we should play a clip of this Indie Mogul video I did a few years ago. It's funny, we were just talking about on the last episode about how sometimes we watch our own tutorial videos to learn something. This is me watching my own video to catch the history of the MPAA. In the early days of film, producers realized that sex and violence sells tickets, but a religious and political backlash caused movie studios to institute censor boards, which denied any film that didn't abide by the Hays Code, a strict document banning profanity like hell and damn. Provocative undressing, even kissing in bed is too lustful. No illegal drugs, interracial relationships, or ridicule of the clergy. After 35 years, Americans no longer wanted to censor these kinds of films. The 1966 film Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is full of sexual content, profanity, and alcohol, but was nominated for 13 Oscars. So the MPAA established a new rating system in 1968. G for anyone, M suggests parental discretion, R restricts persons under 16, and X-rated films for adults only. The PG-13 rating didn't actually even exist until 1984, after a bunch of moderately violent films like Temple of Doom and Gremlins received PG ratings. The MPAA also added the NC-17 rating in 1990 to replace the X rating, which had become synonymous with pornography. Generally, if a film uses the F word 5 times, it'll be bumped up to R.
All right, so do you call it a beep or a bleep?
I guess I call it a bleep, or sometimes I call it a censor beep.
See, and I would just say beep, like you beeped me out.
Yeah, I think the file that I use is actually called censor beep 1, maybe.
And that's your favorite? Do you have a variety of options?
No, I just have one beep. I think I downloaded it a few years ago from a website. Where did I download it from? I think it's called SoundJ. It was like a free website.
So is like every beep the same? Like I'm trying to think back in my head, like, or does everyone make their own beep?
I think there is a standard beep, and it looks like it's 1,000 hertz, or 1 kilohertz is the tone.
What note is that?
I'm not sure. Yeah, at first I thought, oh, is it like an A tone or something, like a tuner note? But it's not. It's 1,000 hertz, which apparently was just like a go-to button on some early soundboards. So I think it just became kind of a standard because people had access to it quickly.
Looks like it's a B sharp C flat ish. Just so you know.
Yeah, for all you music lovers.
I was curious.
But it's funny how much I rely on it. I mean, when I worked in television, there were some things we just couldn't put on TV. So
now, why is it? Weren't you a cable news network?
Yes.
So there was no law forcing you. You just had corporate standards, basically, you were enforcing.
Right. I think a little bit of both potentially. I mean, a lot of this censorship stuff is self-censorship. The government isn't often stepping in. The MPAA ratings are voluntary. The FCC does try to keep people from saying like obscenity during the middle of the day on broadcast networks, over-the-air networks. And then they also keep obscenity. Wait, which one is it? I can never remember all these definitions. There's obscenity, there's indecency, there's profanity. I guess profanity is not allowed on broadcast during the day. Obscenity is not allowed on cable, which would have to be truly obscene, something that really offends people culturally.
So, like, I just watched the finale of Game of Thrones. Like, there's some pretty graphic content in that, and that's not obscene, I guess.
I guess not. But it's also, all this stuff is really vague about what you can and can't do. I mean, I think if you were on HBO inciting violence against an ethnic group, then now you've done something really terrible.
Yeah.
So there are, the FCC can step in and stop you from doing things. But then also a lot of these things have to be reported by the public. The FCC isn't like actively watching your TV show and deciding to fine you when you do something bad. People have to like write in and say they were offended, I guess.
Which I'm sure leads to some interesting shows getting the most comments.
Right, I'm sure.
But it is mostly to that type of reporting.
Yeah. It is mostly self-policing, though. Like, mostly, it's not the FCC that television creators are worried about. They're just worried about their audience and their advertisers. Are they going to piss them off?
So you worked in cable news, right? Is that an accurate description?
Yeah.
How were those rules laid out for you? Was there a packet of information on your first day that says we don't allow this, and this? Or is that something you just kind of picked up on? Or you have producers who are like, I don't feel good about that? How did that go down on a...
Yeah, there was never anything... I'm sure there was a written standard somewhere, and it wasn't my job to need to know that. But I did just have kind of instilled in me, I think we all know not to say, like, George Carlin's 7 dirty words.
Yep.
In fact, I've seen like radio stations which are subject to FCC profanity issues because they're over the air. Sometimes they'll just put those words up on the wall, like, don't say these words. If you're not familiar with what these words are, just go Google George Carlin's 7 dirty words.
George Carlin, 7 words.
So, like, I knew if we said any of those things, the F word, anything like that, I would go ahead and bleep it. We're not going to put that on TV. Even if we're allowed to, I don't even know if we're allowed to, but, like, our audience doesn't, we probably don't want to put that out to our audience.
See, now there's one word on this list that I would not have considered particularly profane.
Well, that's because...
And I'll leave it to the audience to decide which one.
That's what's so funny. A lot of these rules that we stand by are based on the 60s and 70s and culture changes. And the definition of what's profane and obscene changes. But I will say that one word that's often considered inappropriate that did make it onto our air a few times in pieces that I made was the N-word.
Well, there's definitely political and important First Amendment issues at stake there, right?
Right. I mean, well, clearly, if a politician were to say something profane, we might consider putting it on air because it's newsy. And in the case of the N-word, while most of the time we're not comfortable saying it, it came out in these conversations with like black directors talking about films or talking about culture and issues they've faced in their community. And so it just felt strange to censor someone when they're talking about an important issue to them.
Sure. And I think that makes perfect sense.
Right. So I think context is important too. And you can definitely, and that was the kind of thing. I went to my boss. I said, I feel weird bleeping this. I shouldn't, right? And he was like, yeah, let me check. We ran it by standards, and they said, yeah, I think in this case that's appropriate to put on TV the way it is.
Can I ask you ran it by standards? What does that mean?
Well, it's like I don't even know who that is. Someone above my boss. It may have been a lawyer. It may have been just his boss. A lot of times that's how it was in television. Just who is ultimately going to get blamed when this thing goes on TV, as long as everyone is comfortable saying, yeah, I put it on TV for a reason, then we're all good.
So who has ultimate authority on what goes on the air? Is there like a news director?
Yeah, there's levels of management. Like we had our executive producer on the show, and then there's like his boss that oversees all of television news, that sort of thing.
So I've seen the show Newsroom. It's just like that, right?
Just like Newsroom.
That's what I thought.
I read that on Breaking Bad that AMC allowed the show to have one F word per season.
So they had to really be judicious with its use.
I guess. So yeah, I mean, that's another example of like self-policing. They could, I suppose, although maybe advertisers would flee if they said it too much.
So they recognize that there is value in being able to add a little shock or intensity, but didn't want it to overrun the show. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, I think so. And at my job, while we generally avoided putting those kinds of words on television, we did occasionally put them in web videos because we felt like we could or should not bleep them sometimes.
I've seen content produced by you in your younger days with some inappropriate language.
Yeah, I guess I kind of wonder about like why I've decided to keep inappropriate language off of my YouTube channel generally. I think it's just like the brand I'm trying to cultivate.
Because, I mean, let's be honest. Both of us, I think, would use profanity in regular conversation, at least somewhat occasionally, right? It's not like we avoid swearing all the time. Right.
I mean, we're definitely like censoring ourselves a little bit right now by having this conversation and not saying the words that we're talking about.
Sure.
But I really don't want to have to add that explicit tag.
No.
On iTunes. In fact, I looked up like what does iTunes let you do. I mean, I think you can get away with a lot, but they had some guidelines that are very similar to YouTube's community guidelines. I mean, in both places you can get away with. Of course, you can say swear words in videos and on podcasts, but in both cases, they generally want you to stay away from hate speech, scams, copyright, threatening other people. And I guess iTunes would prefer that you definitely use the explicit metadata, use that tag when you have explicit language, otherwise they might kill your episode. And they also don't want you to put explicit things in the titles.
Right, they're just going to pop up when people are searching and things like that.
Right. iTunes even says don't put references to illegal drugs, profanity, or violence in the podcast title description or artwork.
Interesting. And what are YouTube's rules then? Like, there's no nudity allowed on YouTube, right?
Right. So YouTube's community guidelines are no pornography or sexually explicit content, no graphic or violent content, although they kind of make an exception for documentary. Like if it's news value, then you may be able to show violent content. Although, I mean, I think violent is, how do you define that? You could clearly put action kind of stuff, people shooting at each other and things, but I think they just don't want to see graphic content that's primarily intended to shock people.
Sure. Which makes sense.
They don't want to see hate or condoning violence against a particular race, gender identity sort of thing. They don't want to see spam. They don't want to see harmful content that encourages people, especially kids, to get hurt.
Like, watch me jump off this balcony, and you can too.
Yeah, I guess they want you to avoid that.
Which is good, because do you know how much my kid watches YouTube, my 8-year-old? Like, that's all he ever wants to do. That's what these kids these days do, is watch the YouTubes. Learning all kinds of bad stuff.
So let's see. I think we figured out if Sriracha, to finally answer Danny Tanner's question, if Sriracha were rated by the MPAA, which I could pay for, $2,500, I bet I'd get a G rating. Because I don't think it requires any parental guidance. Do you think my film requires parental guidance to watch?
I mean, that guy does chug a whole bottle of Sriracha, which doesn't
Well, that's what I wonder. I guess that is potentially harmful for your children.
Are you encouraging others, especially kids, to get hurt with that kind of content, Griffin Hammond?
Yeah. Well, knowing kids the way you do, seeing someone chugging a bottle, looking distressed afterward, do you think that would encourage them?
Well, I have tried to get them to eat Sriracha on many occasions, and they will not do it. So I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Right. So at least for your kids, it's not harmful. Maybe
I'm like,
for other
it's really good on pizza. And they're like, no, it's spicy. It's cute.
And now we know that we potentially have to follow different guidelines for television, for cable, for internet, for podcasts.
So, Griffin, under what circumstances do you think you would consider content that was more inappropriate than what you normally put out on your personal YouTube?
I guess I guess I'd be looking for context if it was documentary. I mean, I'd be comfortable in a documentary kind of video if I'm capturing something that really happened. People sharing their honest feelings through profanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about, I mean, do you ever consider doing narrative work? If you did narrative work, do you think it would be more adult in nature than some of the non-fiction material you put out?
Yeah, I think you're right. In narrative work, I probably might go that direction. I mean, it's generally, if you're trying to capture the way that people actually speak in a story, they probably would speak with some profanity.
Sure.
Yeah,
so
I wouldn't
yourself
be scared of
are
that.
okay consuming content that might be deemed inappropriate to some.
Yeah, I just think that for like tutorial videos, there's no reason to put it in there, so why add that layer?
Yep. Did you watch the season finale of Game of Thrones?
I did.
Quite inappropriate, but quite excellent, and we will not have any spoilers. Do not worry.
Should we take a look at our questions this week?
I think we should, but I will say, excellent video question from friend of the show, Danny Tanner. Thank you, Danny.
Yeah, thank you for that. So our first question is not even a question, it's just a comment from Martin Bellier on YouTube, who just said, the echo hurts.
That was you this time, right? Not me?
Yeah.
My pillow is still in place. So
where's your pillow?
Behind the mic, in between the wall and the mic.
Oh. So you're stopping some reverb off the wall there.
Just a little bit of bounce that I heard a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
With this new location of the microphone.
Last episode, I went to probably the worst kind of place I could go for reverb when we were recording the episode.
Big empty room with wooden floors, it looked like.
Right. This was my friends in Kentucky are moving out of their home. And so their living room that I was recording in, it's a beautiful place, but it was just empty, no furniture. And the furniture normally would absorb some some sound waves. So hardwood floors, empty walls, no furniture, just sound waves bouncing all over that room.
That
I don't know.
happens.
I didn't think it sounded that bad. Like, it wasn't
No.
distracting, was it?
No, I noticed it right away, but it immediately left my mind as I continued to listen to the episode.
Right. Yeah, I think like we generally try to remove reverb. Like right now, I actually have a blanket up right behind the camera. In fact, I should take a picture of this so you can see it. But I do that just to block some bounce that could happen. But this room also has carpet on the floor. I don't think there's a lot of reverb happening in here anyway. So I could try to dampen the room as much as possible, but also like having some room sound is not bad. When you see a space that people are in, it's okay to hear that space a little bit.
Yep, I agree.
But I think the downside is if you're doing voiceover, or when I'm doing documentary and I'm cutting people's interviews, I find if I'm not going to show the shot where we see the room they're in, it can feel weird to hear the fact that they're in a room.
Yep.
Because now you want to know, like, what is this space that I'm hearing?
Why does it sound like they're in a cathedral?
Right. I need to see the cathedral.
We've got an email from William who asks, what is a prime lens? What lenses fit a G85? And what's the difference between my T3 and the G85? Griffin, what's a prime lens?
A prime lens... I love questions like this because I'm sure that we, for many episodes, have just said, oh, you need a prime lens, you need a zoom lens, and don't often say what a prime lens is. But a prime lens is just a lens that doesn't zoom.
Prime lens, no zoom. Zoom lens, zoom.
So, like, a zoom lens that I have is a 12 to 35, and it'll be written as 12-35 millimeters. A prime lens that I love is the 12 millimeter prime that I'm shooting on right now. It's only 12 millimeters. That's it.
You zoom with your feet.
Yep.
Which means get closer or farther away if you need to change your framing.
But the reason we talk about prime lenses so much is that, and generally recommend that most people probably need a prime lens, a zoom lens at least, for the kind of work they want to do. A prime lens can often be much cheaper than a zoom lens and get you a lot more light performance.
Yep.
Just because it has to do less. There's less elements moving around when it zooms.
Yeah, if you're on a budget, primes are your friend. That is for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you could probably get 2 decent primes for under $500, right?
Easy. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Whereas like one zoom lens will probably cost you $500.
He also is asking about the G85 versus the T3 and what lenses go on a G85. So the G85 is a Panasonic Micro Four Thirds lens mount. So Panasonic and Olympus both make cameras that use the Micro Four Thirds format. So that's the type of lens you want to look for. The T3, I believe, that's a Canon, right? That's a Rebel?
Yeah. Yeah, I assume he's talking about the T3i, or maybe there is just a T3 model.
And those do not use the Canon full frame lenses, right? It's a different lens, right?
Right, it's kind of a crop sensor. And there is a T3, but it's also called a Rebel. But yeah, different lens mounts, so you'll buy different lenses. And the Canons have what's called a longer, a deeper flange distance, the distance between the sensor and the beginning of the camera, the mount. So you just can't swap lenses very easily between the two cameras.
Yep.
Or rather, it's easier to put those Canon lenses on the Panasonic, and it's impossible to put those Panasonic lenses on the Canon with an adapter. Here's a YouTube comment we got from Michael Turner. Good question for you, Nick. He's interested in finding out how much of a deposit you take from your wedding couples. He says most of the weddings he shoots and edits are through other companies, but I'm beginning to branch out on my own. I was thinking of asking for $500 to hold the date, and maybe 90 days prior to the wedding, asking for an additional amount that is equal to half of the total. He's wondering what you do.
What I do, $100 deposit just to hold the date, which is probably too low, but never really was a problem for me. 30 days before the event, I took half payment, and I took the final payment after I had shown them the videos, but before they got their DVDs. I'm not necessarily recommending that as a best practice. To be honest, I think if it were my full-time career, I would be asking for full payment before the event. since it was part-time and I get busy, waiting till the videos were complete to ask for final payment, I found to be very good self-motivation to get the editing done in a timely fashion. So I continued to do that. But I think if this were my career, I would definitely be looking for full payment before I did an event. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I also did that same model. I think a lot of people do that, deposit up front, half before, half after. And that felt good to me. Like, I felt like I'd probably feel bad taking all the money up front, even though that might be completely appropriate and responsible. But I just know that I haven't delivered anything yet, and I maybe do need that motivation. And
I did have more than one occasion someone not pay me the final payment.
But you also withheld I guess you had done all the work, but you did withhold the final product.
I did withhold the final product, though, they saw them online first. So I don't know if they downloaded them or what have you. So they really could have gotten a hold of them. But they didn't get DVDs or anything, and I took them down right away. And one eventually paid and got their stuff, and one never came back to me. So I don't know.
Wow.
It's still saved on my NAS, though, if they ever want their video.
I guess I've just been lucky. I've never had a problem like that. And all the corporate work I do, I mean, anytime I work with a company making a video, you almost always invoice a company and then get paid after the fact. I think in a few rare circumstances have I asked for some money up front, or sometimes if I've filmed months before the editing is supposed to happen, maybe there's many different shoot days. Sometimes I'll invoice in advance, but I'm used to getting paid way after the fact, so it doesn't bother me too much.
What do you use to keep track of who owes you money and how much and when it's due and things like that?
I've done a lot of things over the years. For a long time, I was just putting everything into a Excel spreadsheet and then Google spreadsheets. For a while, I was using kind of an invoice tracking service. I don't even remember what it was called.
FreshBooks or one of those online services?
Yeah, it was something like that, but it wasn't that one. And then these days, I'm actually using QuickBooks Self-Employed, which automatically tracks a bunch of your income and expenses, just kind of populates them into a list, and then you can just kind of go through really quickly for tax purposes and just say, this is personal, this is business. And that's been pretty good, even though it's not tracking my invoices. It's just been pretty good for kind of seeing what I've received and what I haven't.
We have a YouTube comment from Matter Graphica. Welcome back, Matter Graphica. He had an event shoot a few days ago and decided to rent out a Glidecam HD 2000. Did all the balancing and adjustments prior to the shoot, but when he used it, it wasn't as smooth as he thought it would be. Thinks maybe it's because it was his first time. Any tips or tricks to get good Glidecam shots?
You and I have both used Glidecams.
Glidecam, yes. I know the frustration and the pain. Getting it perfectly balanced, it just takes a long time. It's been my experience. I never got particularly good at balancing the Glidecam. But you do have to take the time to balance it perfectly, exactly like you're going to shoot it. That means LCD screen out, lens cap off, camera on, because elements move around in the lens. So you really...
And I had a little quick release plate on mine, so I could pop the camera on and off real quick. But I feel like even if you didn't push the quick release plate in all the way to the same point, you'd have to if it was just off by a millimeter, anything, the LCD, it all throws the weight off.
And then even once it's balanced, it takes some practice to get the kind of shots you want, especially since you're likely doing some movement and trying to get the camera pointed exactly where you want it as you go through those movements. You need a very light touch with the other hand in order to kind of control that direction of the camera, and it just takes a good bit of practice. So
yeah, you'll definitely get better with it.
Yeah.
And if you're new to it, if you're completely new to it, there's lots of YouTube tutorials on exactly how to calibrate it. I mean, I know all the steps now. Like, I know that swing test where weren't you trying to get like a 3 second
2 to
swing?
3 second swing? Yeah, when you hold it sideways and you drop it and the bar comes down. If it comes down too fast or too slow, it means you don't quite have it right. So yeah, definitely Google for some balance tips. Though, can I be honest? He says he rented it. I mean, I think that's a good way to try it out. If you think it's going to be something you use regularly, I would say buy one, because you need to practice a ton. And if you're just renting on event days, it's going to be really hard to get the practice in you need.
Yeah. Although I wonder these days, even if you get really good at it. You know how to use it pretty well. It was never a flawless product.
No.
I mean, you could get a really cool, beautiful shot for a few seconds, and then it would start to float off into its own place. Or you just have to be comfortable getting a hand back on it and fixing it, which doesn't always look perfect. But I just figure these days with electronic gimbals on the market, you probably could get a much more reliable system. I mean, the price is more, but it'd be worth investigating that.
I have one shot on the Glidecam I'm pretty proud of from a wedding reception. Maybe I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah. I mean, I did rely on it really heavily, and all my favorite shots in my wedding films were the Glidecam. So you can definitely get the results you need, but just recognize that you're not going to want to shoot a whole ceremony with it or something. It's going to be it's flipping all over the place.
They're heavy. Yeah, they kind of hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing. They use a lot of weight, and the newer electronic gimbals don't need all that weight to perform what they're doing.
And I would often find myself stabilizing in post a shot that was on the Glidecam.
Well, and everything I shot on the Glidecam, I shoot in slow motion, so that you can. One, if I know that I may only get 2 good seconds out of a Glidecam shot, at least it's 4 seconds in slow motion. But also that stabilizes it even more, or makes it look more stable. Here's a YouTube comment from ThulZ, who says that he started shooting 4K 24p and sees blurriness when reducing the speed of the video in Final Cut Pro 10. My camera doesn't have 4K 60p, so is there a trick to mix 4K 24 frames per second and 1080 60 frames per second?
Well, blurriness is going to be a function more of the shutter speed, less the frame rate. Am I on the right path here, Griffin?
That's where I was going when I first read this, but I see that he's slowing it down in Final Cut, and I assume he's working in a 24 frame timeline, but he's shot in 24 frames. So by slowing it down, I wonder if he has frame blending on.
Sure.
So what it's doing is it knows there's going to be gaps between frames, so it's just dissolving between frame A and frame B to create a new frame in the middle. And those can look kind of blurry because they literally are 2 frames on top of each other.
And so that takes us to the retiming options, right? You've got a couple options when you're doing slow motion in Final Cut Pro 10 for how it develops those in-between frames.
Right.
So the one he may want to look at, correct me if I'm wrong, optical flow. Am I on the right path?
I would, yeah.
Yeah. So I know they keep changing this, so I'm pulling up Final Cut right now, unless you know off the top of your head how you do it. There it is. So under the retime menu, there's a section called video quality. It defaults to normal. There's also frame blending, and the last is optical flow. So give each of those a try. Optical flow is the one that takes the most processing power, but might give you a better result.
Yeah, normal is just don't do anything, just double every frame. So if you have 24 frame footage and you've slowed it down to 50%, normal is just frame A, frame A, frame B, frame B, frame C, twice in a row. Frame blending dissolves them, and then optical flow tries to actually draw new frames, which for some footage works really well, and for other footage with a lot of action and unpredictable action can look
horrible.
Really terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Now he's saying, what about shooting some of it in 1080 60p on a different camera and just blending that footage together? I mean, that's not an unreasonable option too, right?
Right, especially considering that 1080 still looks really good. I mean, I was mixing 1080 footage in my Eclipse video that I put out last week. I was shooting 4K footage on the GH5 and 1080 footage on the Spark. And they're not, the Spark footage is 4 times smaller than the 4K footage. It's half as wide, half as tall. But it looks good.
And there's no real trick to it, right? You just drop the 1080p footage onto the 4K timeline and it's going to automatically up-res it.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's just going to quadruple every pixel. So you're not going to get the same resolution quality, but that beautiful slow motion will still look beautiful. And I think for most of your clients, they're not going to care that you're mixing the two.
All right, we got 2 questions from Tushar in India. Question 1, photo styles or picture profiles. He says there's a ton of options like Vlog and natural and vivid, and each person seems to have their own opinion about what tweaks to make to the profiles. He knows how to tweak them, but he's not sure how to analyze them to get the best settings. So like when you can go in and adjust sharpness and contrast and hue and things like that. And he says it seems to be an awful lot of work to go in and check each profile and their settings to figure out the best one. Any advice?
I love that he writes, it's an insane number of permutations and combinations.
I skipped the best part.
If you tried to go through and like mess with one, go take a look at it. I've never done that. I've never like made a bunch of settings changes and then thought, does it look better now? I guess I just haven't let myself get too worried about the pixel peeping.
Do you know what I do? I go to Google and I type G85 best picture settings, enter. And then whatever the internet tells me is what I do. Which I guess we're the internet in this case, and we are to tell him.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can always rely on other people to have done some of these experiments for you. But I also find that I guess you want to find the middle ground of trying some things, experimenting and checking and seeing if you like it, like you say. But you don't want to go crazy and check everything because you'll always think there's something better. But I think also it's your personal preference. So I think you can make a couple changes, try some of the built-in settings, start with a setting that looks closest to what you want. And if there's one thing about it that you think is wrong, like, oh, it could be a little bit sharper, then go mess with sharpness. But I wouldn't play with everything because I think I'm pretty happy with just what comes out of the box, the natural color profile on my camera.
Me too. He follows up with a second question. He says he has a couple of small LED lights. He's wondering what the best way to diffuse them for run-and-gun documentary type shooting. Carrying around light stands and boom arms seems too large to set up. And same question for a shotgun mic that he wants to get close to his subject but doesn't want a ton of gear to take with. Go, Griffin. This is your area of expertise. Time to shine.
Yeah, I don't like carrying around light stands, which is one reason I use lightweight LED lights, and I'll use the Pedco Ultra Clamp to clamp lights to things, so I can stay really lightweight. But I do think, depending on how you're mounting the LEDs, one look that I don't like, this is up to your personal preference, I don't love the look of LED lights on top of the camera.
Kills your shadows.
Yeah, all the shadows are coming from the same place that the lens is coming from. So, they're pretty much non-existent. It's like that Blair Witch look or that television news look. So, if there's a way to do it, he says he doesn't want to have a big boom arm, but I do like the idea of having a light out to the side of the camera, even if it's attached to the camera, which you could either do with some sort of arm or just like have a second person hold it, or you could hold it off to the side or something like that.
Yeah, but I think every time I've seen you use off-camera lights, you are just taking something and clamping it to something in the general vicinity.
Yeah, I do that a lot. Yeah, there's always something to clamp onto. And then you can always reposition yourself very quickly in relationship to the light and kind of decide, oh yeah, it looks a little bit better from this angle.
And then he asked about shotgun mics as well, and what I've seen you do is Pedco Ultra Clamp that recorder to the tripod, and you've got like a 6-foot XLR cable, and you hold the mic just out of frame.
Yeah, I'm usually just holding it. I don't even bring a mic stand. That's one less thing I don't want to have to travel with. And you're right to always be thinking about how can you get as close as possible with that mic. You could put your mic on top of your camera. You could even clamp it to your tripod. But in most cases, unless you're using a really wide-angle lens, your subject is going to be a few more feet away, and I would rather get it as close as possible. So, like, I was shooting a project recently where I was using my 42.5 millimeter to shoot interviews.
Nice and tight.
Very tight, and much tighter than I'm used to for shooting interviews. Normally, I like to shoot with a 12 millimeter something, and I can pretty much stand with my camera, and I mean, I could do it handheld and put the mic in someone's face. But you can imagine at 42.5,
you were having to back off. You were probably 5-6 feet away.
Yeah, the camera, was probably 7 feet away from the person. So I still want to get the mic really close, and I still don't have a mic stand or anything. So I just stand really close to the person I'm interviewing, kind of next to the eye line for the camera, but I'm several feet in front of the camera. and then I just pop out the little LCD so I can kind of look back at the camera and go, yep, I think he's still in the shot. I think I'm still out of the shot. But that's one benefit of using, a microphone that doesn't have to be plugged right into the camera or has a long XLR cable. I mean, you can put the microphone anywhere.
We're off next week. Oh, good.
I was just wondering if I did it. Did I answer that question fully?
You did, sir. You did an excellent job. I'm very proud of you.
Oh, good. I just needed some validation.
It seems like you've been doing this video stuff. Like, you might be able to take it to the next level. You might be able to turn this hobby into a job.
Yeah. I could make this into a career. That could be fun.
So we're going to take next week off.
Yes, but we did record a bonus episode. It's every 8 weeks we take a break, 1 week off from the podcast, but we'll be back in 2 weeks on September 13th, where we will be together.
Yeah, we're going to have a little fun at the, what? I forget.
Doc
Utah. That's what it is. At Dixie State University?
Yeah, this is in St. George, Utah. It's a film festival that I have gotten into before, and with Sriracha, and didn't go that time. This time I'm in with Hand Cut, the film that I shot for Panasonic, and I want to go. And it's not far from you, so we're gonna both go to Utah.
Yeah, it should be fun, and hopefully shoot some fun videos along the way.
So actually, if anyone wants to go to Doc Utah, Hand Cut is playing on September 8th and September 9th, and we will be there for both screenings, doing Q&As.
Are you doing Q&A?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I actually don't know if both screenings have a Q&A, but I assume so, and I will participate. Although it's the shorts program, so I will be in a Q&A with lots of people.
As you so often are. Alrighty. Well, should we real quick run through these 7 dirty words?
No.
Okay.
We won't say any of them. We just end the show with 7 bleeps in a row.
Alrighty, friends. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Just friendly words and goodbyes at the end.
Yeah. We'll talk to you later, you son of a... My camera just shut off.
Huh. Battery dead?
I guess so. It was full when I started, though I didn't change it. Give me a second. I got another battery.